I don't know if this is a sad time or a great time. I'm not sure. I think it's sad to see everybody distorting, calling for censorship of somebody that they don't like, and easily propagandize into doing that. So that's sad, but maybe it's happy because workers are finally uniting and shutting stuff down in Canada. Eh? And isn't it funny how we're all, if you're a lefty and a Democrat, no, you're always supposed to be with the workers. Oh, well, not those workers. Oh, not, you mean the workers who are actually have power? The ones who are actually asserting themselves, like in Canada, eh? Not like that. So anyway, Noam Chomsky was on. We're talking about Joe Rogan, and Noam Chomsky was being interviewed by why am I blank? Oh, I'm so bad with names.
Marc Lamont Hill, who
that's it. Who was
on my old podcast? Yeah.
Who, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt. Wasn't he fired from CNN for telling the truth about Palestine?
I had not any idea of that, but he was on my old podcast with Sherrod, and I liked him. So.
Marc Lamont Hill, CNN. I'm almost 1,000%. I think I covered that story.
I wasn't even sure, because I stopped watching the news like a long time ago after all this other stuff. And if he's like a stand-up guy, I'm happy to hear it.
On November 30th, 2018, NBC News, they say CNN on Thursday parted ways with contributor Marc Lamont Hill after a speech the college professor made on Israel and Palestine.
Yeah? Okay, so I was right. So he's interviewing Chomsky. So he knows what it's like to be censored for telling the truth about something. I'm talking about Marc Lamont Hill. He lost his job, lost a lucrative job. And he wasn't even saying it on CNN. I think he said it
United Nations.
He said it at the UN. And that video made the rounds because it was powerful. And he doesn't matter if you agreed with him or disagree with him. He had an opinion on a foreign policy. And that was, you cannot have that opinion. And they got rid of him. And so he's now interviewing Chomsky, and he asks him a great question. And Chomsky, by the way, never looked better. And I'm not making, I don't know. I'm making fun because I know he's afraid to go get his hair cut. I know that's what this is. Anyway, somebody should let Chomsky know he's going to get COVID. Maybe it's Fauci. Who knows? But here he asks him a question, and Chomsky dismisses the real concern. Let's listen. This is kind of sad.
Professor Chomsky, over the years, you have been a consistent defender of free speech. But now what we're seeing is an uptick in information control in the name of combating misinformation. We see social media giants deplatforming users that spread misinformation. Most recently, musicians Neil Young and Joni Mitchell boycotted Spotify for its deal with the Joe Rogan podcast, which medical professionals say has spread falsehoods about COVID-19. How do you feel about these efforts to stop misinformation through deplatforming?
I'm generally opposed to it, but we should bear in mind that that's a very minor part of the suppression of free speech.
So it's official that I mean, here's more to this, and I'll play it for you, but it's dumb. He's worried about, again, a different kind of censorship. They're back to wanting to pull books from libraries. But anyway, we're going to get to it. I'll play it. We'll talk about it. But for him to pretend that what started as a banning of Alex Jones and now has moved on to a Kennedy, to a former president, now to prominent doctors and scientists that they just don't like, now to try to censor the guy who's got the biggest following in entertainment today, that everybody, so that's not the big problem. A guy who has 11 million views of his show, that's not the big problem. The guy that they're trying to, that guy, the guy who's actually pushing back against the status quo, telling truths they don't want to hear, that's not the problem. Holy shit. Chomsky is, again, he's a shell of his former self. He doesn't make sense anymore when he talks. And that is beyond disheartening. You might as well have Joe Scarborough sitting there.
Jimmy, if I had a liver spot for every time Noam Chomsky disappointed me this year, I would be Neil Young and Joni Mitchell.
You want to hear? Here, I'll play the rest of his answer. Here we go.
And information. The major part is what is happening in the Republican legislature.
That's the real problem is Republicans. Not Democrats, not the establishment, not the oligarchy, not the media control. This guy wrote Manufacturing Consent. And he's asked a specific question about censorship in the media, and he goes right over to Republican hating. Right, goes from there to there. What? And you gloss over the real problem. And now watch what he says is the real problem. Republican legislatures. We could just get rid of Republicans.
States, top leadership all over the country, right up to former President Trump, who, before he was thrown out of office, issued a directive saying that
he wasn't thrown out of office. He lost the election. Did you ever say that about any other person who lost an election? A re-election campaign? Did you say George Herbert Walker Bush was thrown out of office by Bill Clinton, or that he lost his re-election campaign?
Wait a minute.
What a bullshit inflammatory propaganda Chomsky's doing right there. That's propaganda from him, the guy who wrote Manufacturing Consent.
But what is the propaganda? Is he promoting the unfair election conspiracy?
Right?
By saying he was thrown out by the powers that be? I thought he lost an election.
I thought he lost the election. Sounds like Chomsky's making up stuff about the election being stolen. He wasn't thrown out. Anyway, here we go.
Educational system should not include material which makes children, meaning white children, feel uncomfortable. That's a way of saying we cannot teach the history of the country. We cannot teach the fact that slavery, brutal, vicious slavery, and extermination of the indigenous population was a major part of American history. Not allowed to teach that because it may make white children feel uncomfortable.
No, is that true? Have you heard? Anybody heard of that app that you can't teach the history of the United States, meaning the history of the American Indian or slavery?
No, he's talking about. I mean, wait till those white kids are in those COVID camps he wants. They're going to be real uncomfortable then.
What about I'm sure they teach the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln.
All the nonsense that they
is he making this up, Kurt?
No, that's the standard kind of Democratic line. You know, that's what all that CRT fight stuff is. But what's funny is everybody learns about that stuff. That's not what the fight is about. So he doesn't really know about. I'm shocked at the amount of not really knowing what's going on thing, and not that's just crazy. Also, what good is it teaching this? What do you call it? Vicious, brutal history. If you're going to advocate for more vicious brutality yourself, obviously he didn't learn anything from those lessons. If he's promoting COVID camps,
right? Yeah, which he kind of did. Anyway, let's listen to the rest of his answer.
Elected governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, Republican, just said that parents should warn the government if teachers are doing anything that is divisive, that makes children wonder about the party law, the official line that the United States is a marvelous, wonderful society which has always treated everyone decently. That's a major, books like Toni Morrison's are being taken out of libraries. Libraries under attack. The great historian
library.
Again, I'm not saying that he's making a pretend point. Like what he's saying isn't incorrect in a sense, right?
Well,
Like
Republicans for years, when
this
they
isn't
had
new.
the power, we're trying to. There's whoever is the people in power
Yeah.
are always trying to get what they think the best propaganda for the stupid people, meaning everyone not in the club. Well, how we're going to propagandize the private schools and stuff. They're not going to teach. They learn to read and write and stuff. And that whole assessment of the Youngkin thing was not even about that. If you saw Matt Taibbi talk about it, that had to do more with Asian immigrants who were doing disproportionately well in those schools. And that was the main fight people were having. He hasn't even looked into any of this. He's just parroting the nonsense that they said on CNN and MSNBC.
It does sound like it. It sounds like his critique of this seems very it sounds very pedestrian.
Also, he thinks people still use libraries.
Well, that's the whole thing. He's worried about they're going to ban books from libraries. Have you been to a library? The homeless people go there to warm up and jerk off. That's it. I don't know what. Library.
I mean,
anybody can read any book they want at any time. They go on the internet and find that book.
Except when Amazon wants to take it down.
Except
he
when
doesn't
Amazon.
seem to be aware of that.
I mean, again, nobody's for censorship in library. But this isn't the point that we're talking about. He wants to talk about, yes, we're all against censorship of libraries and books, and of course, that's not new. That's not new. And he's kind of distorting the Youngkin issue, is what you're saying?
100%. He's
Okay.
making it out like the parents have these teachers under siege. Well, I mean, I know you're not supposed to listen to the bad people and all that, but the people pushing the stuff that the parents don't want are all like, don't tell your parents what we told you. That's a little creepy. A lot of parents might take it the wrong way, believe it or not. I'm sure there's tons of parents with dumb ideas like, I don't want you to teach this basic stuff. But this is above and beyond. He's not acknowledging it. This is a new tech industry-led nightmare thing that he should be right on top of.
Yes, he should be right. I guess we had to cut him slack because he's 93 years old and he's out of touch. So I wish people would stop asking him questions. And so he's okay with massive. I mean, well, let's listen to the rest.
Words in, old friend of mine, his very widely read People's History has been taken off library shelves. Children aren't allowed to look at it. That is a huge attack. And we know exactly what model they're following because they say so. Viktor Orban's Hungary. Viktor Orban in Hungary has created what he calls an illiberal democracy, a democracy in which the state power runs the affairs of the population. You may have formal voting, but you don't have independence. Independent university was thrown out of the country. He picks the people who direct the educational system.
And that's why you should also be upset at they're the ones who are controlling the flow of information in our mass media and social medias. That's why that's a super big problem. It's like he's describing the problem and pretending it doesn't apply to the thing it is.
Also,
the fucking censorship problem he's ignoring, but he's describing it perfectly. Go ahead.
I remember when I was a young boy of 11, I guess in the 5th grade, and we were at the school library, and I went to reach for a copy of Howard Zinn's People's History. Like most children my age, I was naturally curious about Howard Zinn. And they said, no, children aren't allowed to see Howard Zinn's People's History. And we were like, please, we're children. We're dying to read this. And they said, no, you can't. So I settled for, I don't know, Harry Potter. That's insane what he just said. Who's keeping kids from Howard Zinn?
I'm not denying that there's people who want to get Howard Zinn's books taken off of libraries.
Right, but it's not the child level that's happening. Like, both the right and left are burning Harry Potter. That's what the
problem
kids' books
is
that are being burned.
The internet, which was supposed to be the great equalizer and give everybody access to everything, is now again being that same kind of authoritarianism he's crying about, and the control of it. It's happening, but he is completely missing it, almost completely, not all the way, but he's almost completely missing it. This is really stunning.
Why do all these people that are so worried about democracy, like, hate democracy in every aspect of life?
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
11 million people like Joe Rogan don't want. He's not even competition for the news, but they're not watching it. Well, we can't have this. It's too stupid. We need an electoral college to elect our podcasts.
Yes. Here we go.
Make sure that they are super racist, anti-Muslim in this case. Make sure to keep Muslims from destroying our white Christian civilization. That's the model. Tucker Carlson practically falls over himself in effusive support for this. President Trump
I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm just watching MSNBC now when I listen to him. Again, Tucker Carlson, the only one who's calling out our imperialism. There's the only person on major news is calling out our imperialism, and he does it in a really insightful way, and he does it at the top of his lungs. And you can't. I mean, he's just Trump, Tucker Carlson. What am I watching? TYT? What the fuck? This is nuts.
Hasn't he heard Joe Rogan's the new Trump?
It's Joe Rogan's the new Trump, buddy.
He doesn't even know that Joe Rogan's the new Trump.
Former President Trump described Orban as one of the most impressive figures of the modern period. This is what the Republicans are aiming for, that kind of society, kind of soft fascism. And that's the major attack.
Like this kind of soft. That's what we're living in right now. You know, we live in a surveillance state. You know that. You know they got rid of habeas corpus. You know that. You know that Barack Obama and Joe Biden do the bidding of the oligarch. You know that. You know that they're the fascists. You know we live in the biggest, most imprisoned culture in the world. You know that. What is this idea that there's just one, what the F? And he's still pretending that both parties don't serve the exact same interests. What is he doing? This guy wrote manufacturing consent, and now he spends a lot of time manufacturing consent.
He's massive.
On free speech and information. The deplatforming kind of thing you mentioned is there. I don't approve of it myself. Can understand it, but don't approve of it. But
I can understand it.
No, you can't.
The thing that's a huge problem, the thing that's the actual problem, I can understand why they're doing it. I don't approve of it, but, you know, I'm not going to get upset about it, certainly. Again, this couldn't be more.
I don't think it's the major issue.
Yeah, the thing that's the major issue is not the major issue. How in the fuck can you decouple those two things from being just the censorship that the Republican Party specifically I can point to? That's the only bad censorship. The censorship that the rest of the oligarchs want to do, that's not a big deal. It's just a guy with 200 million downloads a month. That's not a big deal. You want to censor that? It's not a big deal. You fucking, what is wrong with him? A lot. There's a lot wrong with him right now, and people have been trying to figure out what's wrong with Chomsky, and I don't know what to blame, but he's definitely wrong about almost every time I see him talking. He's now wrong.
They say parts of Noam Chomsky can still be seen today.
Hey, we're doing live stand-up shows in Los Angeles, February 5th, February 12th, February 18th, February 20th, we're in Philadelphia, and then February 26th, back here in Los Angeles in Studio City at our 60-seat theater. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets, and while you're there, become a premium member, get access to all our premium content.